Tonight as glue, tomorrow as tribunal.
The champagne tasted like betrayal, and my wife's laugh sounded like nails on a chalkboard as she threw her head back at something her boss just whispered in her ear. I stood there in my only decent suit, the navy one from our wedding 5 years ago, watching Jessica flirt with Richard Blackwood like I wasn't even in the room. The quarterly company party was in full swing around us, all chrome and glass and people who thought their crap didn't stink because they wore $1,000 watches. "Another beer, sir?" A waiter appeared at my elbow, probably feeling sorry for the construction worker playing dress-up among the corporate elite. "Thanks." I grabbed the bottle and took a long pull, watching Jessica's hand rest on Blackwood's arm. Her wedding ring caught the light, mocking me. This was supposed to be our night. Jessica had begged me to come, said it would look good for her career if her husband showed up to these things. What she hadn't mentioned was that she'd spend the entire evening acting like I had some contagious disease. Blackwood, CEO of Pinnacle Financial Solutions, Jessica's boss, and apparently the star of her recent wet dreams, was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average, smooth where I was rough around the edges, silver-haired where mine was starting to thin. He wore his arrogance like cologne, heavy and suffocating. "So, you must be the famous husband," Blackwood's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade. He'd appeared beside me with Jessica in tow, her cheeks flushed from whatever he'd been pouring in her ear. "That's me, Tommy Mitchell." I extended my hand, noting how his grip lingered just long enough to establish dominance. "You must be the boss Jessica never shuts up about." Jessica's laugh was forced. "Tommy owns a construction company, small jobs mostly." "How quaint." Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Must be nice having such a flexible schedule. All that free time while the real moneymakers are busy." The conversation around us dimmed as people sensed tension in the air. I felt every eye in the room turning our way, vultures circling for a show. "Someone has to fix what you suits break," I said, keeping my voice level. "Funny how you need guys like me when your fancy buildings start falling down." Blackwood chuckled, the sound sharp and predatory. True. But there's a difference between being needed and being valuable." Jessica giggled, actually giggled, like we were back in high school, and the quarterback just noticed her. It made my stomach turn. "Richard's been teaching me so much about high-level strategy," she gushed, moving closer to him. "Things they never cover in community college business classes." The dig hit home. Jessica knew I'd never finished college, knew it was a sore spot. But saying it here, in front of all these people with that particular tone, that was new territory. "Education comes in all forms," I replied, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Blackwood sensed weakness like a shark sensing vulnerability. "Absolutely. Some people learn in classrooms, others learn by getting their hands dirty." He made it sound like a disease. More people were watching now. I could see Jessica's work friends, Sarah, Michelle, and Karen, whispering behind their wine glasses, probably placing bets on how this would go down. "Speaking of getting hands dirty," Blackwood continued, his voice carrying across the room, "Jessica was just telling me about your recent projects. Kitchen renovations, was it? Bathroom tile work? The way he said it made honest work sound like something you'd scrape off your shoe." Jessica's face was turning red, but not from embarrassment, from excitement. She was enjoying this. "Someone has to do the real work," I said, my jaw starting to clench. "Oh, absolutely. We need people to handle the manual labor while the rest of us focus on moving markets, creating jobs, building empires." Blackwood's smile turned cruel. "It's adorable, really, like having a pet that brings you dead mice and expects praise." The room went dead silent. Even the waiters stopped moving. Jessica didn't defend me, didn't say a word, just stood there next to her boss, her hand still on his arm, watching me with something that looked dangerously close to pity. "At least I earned my money honestly," I said, my voice carrying further than I intended. Blackwood's laugh was loud enough to fill the silence. "Honestly? My dear boy, you're living off your wife's salary. What's honest about being a kept man?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. It wasn't true, not entirely, but there was enough reality to make it sting. Jessica made more money, had better insurance, covered most of our mortgage. I'd been struggling lately, taking smaller jobs, watching bigger companies undercut my bids. "That's not," I started, but Blackwood cut me off. "No shame in it, really. Some men are providers, others are, well, provided for." He shrugged like he was discussing the weather. "The world needs house husbands, too." People started laughing. Nervous chuckles at first, then louder as they realized I wasn't fighting back. Jessica's work friends were practically cackling. Even some of the waitstaff were smirking. "You know what your problem is, Tommy?" Blackwood leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a stage whisper that somehow carried across the entire room. "You're forgettable, replaceable, a nobody husband living on handouts, spineless, penniless, and completely forgettable." The laughter grew louder. Someone, I think it was Sarah, actually snorted wine through her nose. Jessica wasn't laughing, but she wasn't stopping it either. She just stood there watching me drown. That's when Blackwood made his final move. He turned to Jessica, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her. Full on the mouth, right there in front of everyone, in front of me, with the kind of passion that left no doubt about what was happening between them. The room erupted. People were whooping, cheering, taking pictures with their phones. Jessica melted into him like butter, her arms wrapping around his neck, her body pressing against his expensive suit. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Blackwood looked directly at me with triumph in his eyes. "The better man always wins, Tommy." I should have felt rage, should have felt the urge to throw a punch, make a scene, defend whatever was left of my dignity. Instead, I felt something else, something cold and calculating sliding into place behind my ribs. I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a nervous laugh, but a real, genuine smile that made Blackwood take a small step back. "You know what, Richard?" I said, my voice perfectly calm, perfectly clear. "If I were you, I'd check my stock price." The room was still laughing, still buzzing with excitement over the public humiliation they'd just witnessed. But Blackwood's face went white, actually white, like someone had just walked over his grave. He knew something he didn't want anyone else to know. I nodded once, finished my beer, and set the empty bottle on a nearby table. "Thanks for the party, folks. Really memorable." I walked out through the crowd, feeling their eyes on my back, hearing their whispers follow me to the elevator. But I didn't care anymore. The game had changed, and I was done playing by their rules. The elevator doors closed, and I finally allowed myself a real smile. It was time to show them what a nobody could do. The next morning, I sat in my truck outside Jessica's office building, watching the suits scurry in and out like ants. My phone was full of missed calls from her, texts ranging from angry to apologetic to threatening. "We need to talk. You embarrassed me last night. Richard says you were acting weird. Don't do anything stupid, Tommy." Too late for that, sweetheart. I'd spent the night doing research, digging into Pinnacle Financial's recent SEC filings, quarterly reports, and employee reviews on Glassdoor. Amazing what you could find when you knew where to look and had nothing left to lose. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessica. "Come home. We can work this out." Right, work it out, like she'd worked it out with her boss's tongue down her throat. I scrolled through the photos on my phone, screenshots I'd taken months ago when Jessica left her laptop open. At the time, I'd thought they were just work emails, boring corporate stuff I didn't understand. Now they looked a lot more interesting, especially the ones discussing the Miami project and the off-books consulting fees. My phone rang. Dave Morrison, my oldest friend, and the only guy from the neighborhood who'd stayed in touch after Jessica started her corporate climb. "Jesus, Tommy, you okay? Sarah's been posting about last night on Facebook. Says you got your A handed to you by some suit." Dave worked construction too, concrete mostly, and had about as much love for corporate types as I did. We'd grown up 3 blocks apart, gotten drunk together, made stupid decisions together, and somehow managed to stay friends even after life pulled us in different directions. "I'm fine, Dave. Better than fine, actually." "You sound weird, man, like serial butcher weird." I laughed, and it felt good. "I'm not going to end anyone. That would be too easy." "Okay, now I'm officially worried. What's going on? Remember that favor you owe me?" "Which one? There's been a lot over the years." "The big one, the one where I didn't tell Marie about you and that bartender in Atlantic City." Silence. Then, "Crap, you're serious about this?" "Dead serious." "What do you need?" I looked up at the gleaming tower where my wife was probably explaining to her boss why her loser husband acted so strangely last night. "How do you feel about a little prank? Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just educational." "Educational how?" "The kind that teaches rich a-holes not to mess with people they don't understand." Dave was quiet for a long moment. "This about the guy who kissed your wife, among other things." "Where do you want to meet?" The plan was simple, elegant, and completely legal, technically. Dave met me at the construction supply yard where we'd worked summers in high school. The owner, Pete Kowalski, still remembered us from back then and was happy to let us borrow a few items for old time's sake. So let me get this straight, Dave said, loading a 5-gallon bucket into my truck. We're going to fill this guy's car with dead fish? Not dead fish. Fish emulsion fertilizer. It's organic, completely non-toxic, and smells like heck. It'll take weeks to get the smell out, if ever. And the other stuff? Expanding foam in the tailpipe, super glue in the door locks, industrial strength itching powder on the seat, all harmless, all temporary, all perfectly legal pranks. Dave grinned. I like it. When do we do this? Tonight. He parks in the executive garage, 3rd level, spot marked CEO. Security camera has a blind spot right behind the pillar. How do you know all this? I held up my phone, showing him Jessica's Instagram from last month. She posted a picture of them having lunch by his car. Caption was, "Power couple vibes." I've been studying that photo for weeks. Wow, Tommy, remind me never to piss you off. Just help me do this, Dave. After tonight, we're even. We shook hands, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement. Blackwood's Porsche was a thing of beauty. Midnight black. Probably cost more than I made in 2 years. Parked in its reserved spot like a monument to his success. By the time we were done, it would be a monument to something else entirely. Dave kept watch while I worked. The fish emulsion went into the air conditioning system, just enough to ensure every time he turned it on, he'd get a nose full of odor rotting salmon. The expanding foam in the exhaust would make the car sound like a dying elephant until he could get it cleared out. The superglue in the locks would force him to call a locksmith, assuming he could even get close enough to the doors without gagging from the smell. The itching powder was Dave's idea, military-grade stuff he'd gotten from a buddy in the service. Just a light dusting on the seat and steering wheel. How long until he finds out? Dave asked, admiring our handiwork. First thing tomorrow morning. He's got that executive meeting at 8. Think this will make him back off? I looked at the car, knowing that in a few hours it would be a source of humiliation instead of pride. This is just the opening move, Dave. Just letting him know the game has started. We packed up our supplies and headed out, leaving no trace except the surprise waiting for Pinnacle Financial's golden boy. I was already at the coffee shop across the street when Blackwood arrived for work the next morning. Through the window, I had a perfect view of the executive garage entrance. At exactly 7:55 a.m., Blackwood's voice echoed through 3 levels of concrete parking structure. What the heck? Even from across the street, I could hear him retching. The fish emulsion had done its job. The entire 3rd level probably smelled like a bait shop in August. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Richard's car got vandalized. Do you know anything about this? I typed back, vandalized? That's terrible. Hope he finds whoever did it. Tommy, I'm serious. This isn't funny. You're right. Vandalism isn't funny. Public humiliation isn't funny either. She didn't reply. 20 minutes later, I watched a tow truck haul Blackwood's Porsche away. The driver was wearing a respirator mask, and even from across the street, I could see him shaking his head in disgust. Phase 1, complete. The email arrived that afternoon, sent from an anonymous account to every employee at Pinnacle Financial Solutions. I'd spent hours crafting it, making sure every word was carefully chosen and completely true. Subject: interesting facts about our leadership. Dear Pinnacle family, did you know that our CEO, Richard Blackwood, claims a $50,000 consulting fee from a shell company in the Cayman Islands every quarter? Did you know this same shell company has no employees, no office, and no business license? Did you know that 3 female employees have filed complaints about Mr. Blackwood's inappropriate workplace behavior in the past 2 years, and all 3 complaints mysteriously disappeared from HR records? Did you know that Pinnacle's charitable donations, the ones Mr. Blackwood uses for tax write-offs, go to organizations that list his wife as a board member? Just thought you should know what kind of man is running our company. A concerned employee. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, watching the email counter tick up as it spread through the company's internal system. My phone started ringing immediately. Jessica, of course. Tommy, what did you do? I'm sitting in my office working on estimates for bathroom renovations. You know, manual labor stuff. Don't lie to me. I know this was you. You know what, Jessica? You don't know crap about me. You made that very clear last night. That was just... Richard was drunk. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything. I laughed, and it came out darker than I intended. You let your boss kiss you in front of a room full of people, in front of your husband, and it didn't mean anything. Silence on the other end. How long has it been going on, Jess? Tommy, how long have you been sleeping with him? More silence. Then so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. 6 months. The words hit like a physical blow, even though I'd known. Seeing it and hearing it confirmed were two different kinds of pain. Why? Because you're not enough anymore. The words exploded out of her like she'd been holding them in for years. You're not successful. You're not ambitious. You're not going anywhere. Richard is everything you'll never be. And what's that? Important, powerful, rich, someone who matters in this world. I closed my eyes, feeling the last pieces of my marriage crumble into dust. You're right, Jess, I'm not those things. But at least I'm honest about what I am. I hung up and turned my phone off. There was work to do. The gym where Blackwood worked out was one of those exclusive places downtown, all mirrors and chrome and people who looked like they'd stepped out of fitness magazines. I'd followed him there twice, learning his routine, his schedule, his habits. He arrived every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. sharp, stayed exactly 90 minutes, and always used the same locker in the men's changing room. I'd been a member for exactly 1 week. Excuse me. I bumped into him near the weight rack, making sure to splash water from my bottle onto his pristine workout clothes. Blackwood looked up, and his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally disgust. You? Me? I smiled and extended my hand. Tommy Mitchell, we met at your party. He ignored the handshake. What are you doing here? Working out, staying in shape. You know, trying to be more like the successful guys? I gestured around the expensive gym. This is where winners come, right? Blackwood's eyes narrowed. If you think some childish prank with my car is going to... Prank? What prank? I tilted my head innocently. Oh, you mean the fish smell? That's terrible. Vandalism is such a problem these days. I know it was you. Prove it. We stared at each other for a long moment, the tension thick enough to cut. Other gym members were starting to notice, conversations dying as people sensed conflict. Stay away from my company, Blackwood said quietly. Stay away from Jessica. And stay the heck away from me. Or what? Or you'll find out what happens to people who cross me. I laughed, actually laughed, and it echoed through the suddenly quiet gym. Richard, buddy, you have no idea who you're dealing with. See, you think I'm just some dumb construction worker who's going to roll over and play dead because you stole my wife. But here's the thing. I've been building things my whole life. Buildings, businesses, relationships. And when you build things, you learn how they come apart. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Your company is built on lies, Richard. Your reputation is built on bullying people weaker than you. Your whole life is built on a foundation of sand. And I'm really, really good at undermining foundations. Blackwood's face flushed red. You're threatening me? Threatening? No, I'm promising. I'm going to tear your life apart piece by piece. And I'm going to do it so cleanly, so perfectly, that you'll never be able to prove I was involved. And when it's over, when you're sitting in the ruins of everything you thought made you better than me, you'll remember this conversation. I patted his shoulder like we were old friends. Enjoy your workout, Richard. And hey, you might want to get your car detailed again. I heard fish smell has a way of coming back. I walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth hanging open and half the gym staring at us. Phase 2 complete. The anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission was a work of art. I'd spent 3 days going through Jessica's emails, the ones she'd carelessly left open on our shared laptop, cross-referencing dates and amounts with public filings. The Miami project turned out to be a series of phantom real estate deals designed to funnel money through offshore accounts. The consulting fees were payments to companies that existed only on paper. It wasn't enough to put Blackwood in prison, but it was enough to trigger an investigation. And investigations had a funny way of turning up more problems than they started with. I printed out 40 pages of documentation, highlighted the suspicious transactions, and mailed it all to the SEC's Enforcement Division with a cover letter explaining my concerns about potential securities fraud at Pinnacle Financial Solutions. Then, I sat back and waited. The investigation notice arrived at Pinnacle's offices 3 days later. By that afternoon, the company's stock had dropped 12% on news of the federal inquiry. Jessica called me, crying. They're putting Richard on administrative leave pending the investigation. His reputation is ruined. The board is talking about forcing him out. That's terrible, I said, not meaning a word of it. Tommy, please. If you know something, if you did something, you have to fix this. My job is on the line too. They're looking at everyone who worked closely with him. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to work so closely with him. This isn't just about me. If Pinnacle goes down, hundreds of people lose their jobs. Then maybe Pinnacle shouldn't have been built on fraud. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Jess. I understand that you chose to hitch your wagon to a criminal because he was successful and exciting. I understand that you threw away our marriage for a man who's about to lose everything. And I understand that now you want me to save you from the consequences of your choices. Please, Tommy, I'll leave him. We can work this out. We can go back to the way things were. The way things were? You mean with you looking down on me, treating me like hired help, making me feel like I wasn't good enough to breathe the same air as you? I laughed bitterly. No thanks. I like myself better this way. This way? You mean vindictive? Mean? Cruel? I mean strong, powerful, important. All the things you said I'd never be. I hung up and immediately called Dave. Phase 3 is go. You ready for the big show? Born ready. When and where? Tomorrow night, Pinnacle's quarterly shareholder meeting. Time to give them a presentation they'll never forget. The Pinnacle Financial Solutions quarterly meeting was being held at the downtown Marriott, a last-minute change from their usual boardroom venue. Too many angry shareholders, too much media attention, too much risk of things getting ugly. I'd bought exactly 1 share of PFS stock 3 months earlier, which gave me the right to attend and ask questions during the public portion of the meeting. Jessica didn't know about the stock purchase. It was listed under my business name, Mitchell Construction LLC. The ballroom was packed with investors, reporters, and company employees. Blackwood sat at the head table looking like a man facing a firing squad, flanked by lawyers and PR flacks. Jessica sat 3 rows back, her face pale and drawn. The CEO, now acting CEO while Blackwood was on administrative leave, was a nervous little man named Patterson, who kept mopping his forehead with a handkerchief as he tried to reassure everyone that Pinnacle's fundamentals remained strong despite the ongoing SEC investigation. "We have complete confidence in Mr. Blackwood's integrity," Patterson said for the 5th time. "These allegations are baseless and will be proven false once the investigation concludes." That's when I stood up. Thomas Mitchell, Mitchell Construction, 1 share. My voice carried easily through the ballroom. "I have a question about the integrity you just mentioned." Patterson looked relieved to have a question from such a small shareholder. "Of course, Mr. Mitchell, what would you like to know?" I pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I'd like to know why Mr. Blackwood has been receiving $50,000 every quarter from Bermuda Shell Holdings, a company with no employees, no assets, and no legitimate business purpose." The room went dead silent. Patterson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I'd also like to know," I continued, my voice growing stronger, "why Pinnacle's charitable donations consistently go to organizations where Mr. Blackwood's family members serve on the board of directors, allowing them to draw salaries from money that's supposed to be going to charity." Cameras started flashing. Reporters began scribbling notes. Shareholders started looking very, very angry. "And finally," I said, pulling out the last document, "I'd like to know why 3 female employees filed misconduct complaints against Mr. Blackwood in the past 2 years, and why all 3 complaints were mysteriously removed from company records." The ballroom erupted. Shareholders were shouting questions, reporters were pushing forward, and Patterson looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Blackwood jumped to his feet, his face purple with rage. "This is a setup. This man is my wife's husband. He's trying to destroy me because of a personal grudge." The admission sent another wave of shock through the crowd. Someone shouted, "What kind of personal grudge?" And suddenly, everyone was looking at me for an answer. I smiled and spoke clearly into the microphone that a helpful reporter thrust in front of me. "The kind of grudge you get when someone steals your wife and then humiliates you in public. But that's just personal. The fraud, the embezzlement, the inappropriate conduct, that's business. And business is what we're here to discuss." I held up another document, printed screenshots of the company's internal communications about moving money through offshore accounts. Pinnacle Financial Solutions isn't just a company built on lies. It's a company run by a man who thinks he's above the law, above consequences, above the people who trusted him with their money and their careers. The crowd was getting ugly now, shareholders demanding answers, reporters firing questions at Patterson and Blackwood, security guards looking nervous. "Mr. Blackwood likes to talk about winners and losers," I continued, my voice carrying over the chaos. He likes to humiliate people he thinks are beneath him. Well, Richard, I looked directly at him, seeing the fear and hatred in his eyes. How does it feel to be the loser for once? That's when Blackwood snapped. He pushed past the lawyers and PR people, shoving his way toward me with homicide in his eyes. "You son of a witch!" he screamed, lunging across 2 rows of chairs. "I'll destroy you! I'll ruin you! You're nothing! Nothing!" Security moved to intercept him, but not before he got close enough for me to see the desperation in his face, the complete breakdown of the smooth, confident mask he'd worn for so long. I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't back down. I just looked him in the eye and smiled. "Check your stock price, Richard." That's when the cameras really started flashing. The video went viral within hours. Financial CEO meltdown at shareholder meeting hit 1 million views before midnight. The footage of Blackwood screaming at me while security dragged him away played on every financial news channel and half the morning talk shows. Pinnacle's stock opened down 37% the next day. By noon, the board had voted to terminate Blackwood's employment and remove him from all company positions. The SEC announced they were expanding their investigation. 3 more women came forward with maltreatment allegations. Jessica's termination letter arrived that afternoon. She showed up at my house, our house, at 6 p.m., looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 days. "Are you happy now?" she asked, standing in the doorway like a stranger. "Is this what you wanted?" I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. The designer clothes, the perfect makeup, the cold eyes that had once looked at me with love. What I wanted was a wife who respected me. What I wanted was a marriage where I didn't have to earn your affection by being someone I'm not. What I wanted was to matter to the person who mattered most to me. You mattered. I was your pet project, Jessica, your charity case, the blue-collar husband you kept around to make yourself feel generous and grounded while you climbed the corporate ladder. She started crying then, ugly tears that smeared her makeup and made her look human for the first time in years. I didn't mean for it to happen. Richard was he made me feel important, powerful, like I was worth something. And I made you feel like you weren't? You made me feel ordinary, safe, predictable. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. I wanted to be extraordinary. So you decided to have an affair with your boss and humiliate your husband in public. That wasn't supposed to happen. The party, the kiss. Richard planned that. He said it would show everyone that he could take whatever he wanted. The admission hit me like a slap. It was planned? He wanted to see if you'd fight for me. When you didn't, he said it proved you didn't really love me. I stared at her, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. I didn't fight because I thought you were worth more than that. I thought you'd never let someone use you to hurt me. I was wrong. Tommy, the divorce papers are on the kitchen table. I'll give you the house, most of the savings, whatever you need to start over. But I want you gone by the end of the week. Where will you go? I gestured toward the street where Dave's truck was parked with the engine running. Dave's got a job in Denver. Commercial construction, big money, clean start. I'm going with him. You're leaving? There's nothing left here for me anymore. She looked around the house we'd bought together, the life we'd built together, the future we'd planned together. What about us? What about our marriage? Our marriage died the night you let another man kiss you in front of a room full of people. Everything since then has just been cleanup. I walked past her toward Dave's truck, then stopped and turned back. For what it's worth, Jess, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope it makes you happy. Tommy, wait. But I was already gone. The warehouse showdown wasn't planned. It just happened. 3 months later, I was back in town, settling the last of the legal paperwork when Dave called me from Denver. Turn on Channel 7. Your buddy Blackwood is all over the news again. I found a sports bar with cable and watched the breaking news coverage with growing amazement. Blackwood had been arrested on federal fraud charges. The SEC investigation had uncovered millions in stolen funds, fake invoices, and offshore accounts. He was looking at 20 years in federal prison. But that wasn't the big story. The big story was Jessica. Apparently, she'd been cooperating with federal investigators for weeks, turning over emails, phone records, financial documents, everything they needed to build an airtight case against her former boss and lover. The reporter was calling her a brave whistleblower who risked everything to expose corporate corruption. I was calling BS. Jessica never did anything that didn't benefit Jessica. If she was cooperating with the feds, it was because they'd offered her something in return. I was proved right an hour later when my phone rang. Tommy, it's me. Hello, Jessica. I need to see you tonight. It's important. I'm not interested in... Richard is trying to frame me for the fraud. He's claiming I was his co-conspirator, that I helped him set up the shell companies. If his lawyers can convince a jury, I could go to prison for 30 years. I felt a familiar cold smile spreading across my face. And you want what from me? Help. You brought him down once before. Maybe you can do it again. Why would I help you? Because despite everything that happened between us, you're a good man. And because I have information you might find interesting. What kind of information? The kind that explains why Richard was so afraid when you mentioned his stock price that night at the party. Now she had my attention. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Meet me at the old Brennan Industries warehouse on 5th Street. Midnight. Come alone. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, knowing I should walk away. Knowing this was probably a trap. Knowing that getting involved with Jessica again would only lead to trouble. But I also knew I had to hear what she had to say. The Brennan warehouse had been abandoned for 15 years, a hulking shell of rusted steel and broken windows that the city kept threatening to demolish. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found. Jessica's BMW was parked near the loading dock when I arrived, her silhouette visible through the windshield. She got out as I approached, looking nervous and jumpy. You came? I'm here. Talk? She glanced around the empty parking lot like she was expecting company. Richard has been planning this for months. The frame job, I mean. He knew the SEC was closing in, so he set up a fall guy, me. That's what criminals do, Jess. They betray people to save themselves. You should know, you helped him do it to other people. I never knew about the fraud. I thought the consulting fees were legitimate. Bees, you knew exactly what he was doing. You helped him cover it up. Her face crumpled. Okay, yes, I knew. But I was in love with him. I thought we were partners, that we were building something together. You were a criminal enterprise. He promised to leave his wife for me. He said after he made enough money, we'd disappear together, start fresh somewhere tropical. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. She wiped her eyes. But that's not why I called you here. Then why? She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Because I found these in Richard's office safe when I was gathering evidence for the FBI. She handed me the envelope. Inside were dozens of photographs. Surveillance photos of me, Dave, Pete Kowalski's supply yard, my truck, my house. Photos taken with a telephoto lens from across the street, through windows, from hiding spots I never would have noticed. He's been watching you since the night of the party, Jessica said quietly. Planning something. Revenge. I flipped through the photos, a chill creeping over me. There were shots of me meeting with Dave, pictures of us at the supply yard, images of me outside the gym, even one of me mailing the SEC complaint. How long has he had these? Weeks, maybe months. He hired a private investigator the day after his car got vandalized. Why are you showing me this? Because there's more. She pulled out a digital recorder and hit play. Blackwood's voice filled the empty warehouse. I want him destroyed, not just embarrassed, not just inconvenienced. I want his life ruined so completely that he'll beg me to put him out of his misery. Another voice, gravelly and professional. That'll cost extra. I don't care what it costs. I want him framed for something that'll put him in prison for decades. Plant pills in his truck, child SSX movie on his computer, whatever it takes. Make it look real. When? After the shareholder meeting, once I deal with this SEC nonsense, Mitchell is next. The recording stopped. Jessica looked at me with something that might have been genuine concern. He's completely lost it, Tommy. The investigation, the public humiliation, losing his job, it broke something in his brain. He blames you for everything. I studied the photos again, noticing details I'd missed before. Timestamps, license plates, strategic angles that would be perfect for establishing an alibi or building a case. Where is he now? I don't know. He disappeared after his arraignment this morning. His lawyer thinks he might run. Or he might decide to finish what he started. A sound echoed through the warehouse, metal scraping against concrete, like a door being forced open. Jessica grabbed my arm. What was that? I listened, every muscle tensing. The warehouse was supposed to be empty, abandoned, secure. But someone was definitely inside. Did you tell anyone you were meeting me here? No, I swear, Tommy, I didn't. Another sound, closer this time. Footsteps on broken glass. Get behind the car, I whispered, pulling Jessica toward her BMW. Keys? In my hand. Start the engine, but keep the lights off. If something goes wrong, drive straight to the police station. What about you? I'll be fine. I've been expecting this. That wasn't entirely true, but it sounded confident. The truth was, I'd been stupid. Walking into an abandoned warehouse at midnight to meet my ex-wife was exactly the kind of mistake that got people ended in movies. But I wasn't planning to die tonight. A voice called out from inside the warehouse, echoing off the metal walls. Tommy, I know you're out there. Time for us to finish our conversation. Blackwood. He sounded drunk or unhinged or both. Come on, Tommy. Don't be shy. You were so tough at the shareholder meeting. Let's see how tough you are now. I looked at Jessica, crouched behind her car with terror in her eyes. Call emergency, I whispered. Tell them there's an armed man threatening people at the Brennan warehouse. Armed? Just do it. I moved away from the car, keeping low, circling toward the warehouse entrance. If Blackwood wanted a confrontation, I'd give him one, but it would be on my terms, not his. The main entrance was a massive sliding door, half open and dark as a cave mouth. I could see light moving inside, a flashlight beam sweeping back and forth. I know what you're thinking, Tommy. Blackwood's voice was getting closer. You're thinking this is some kind of trap, that I'm going to hurt you or frame you or something dramatic like that. I pressed myself against the concrete wall beside the entrance, listening. But you're wrong! I'm not here to hurt you! I'm here to thank you! That didn't sound right. Nothing about this sounded right. You see, Tommy, you did me a favor. You showed me what I really am, what I'm capable of when someone tries to destroy me. The flashlight beam swung toward the entrance. I could see Blackwood now, silhouetted against the dim light. He was holding something in his other hand, something that reflected the flashlight beam. I've been thinking about our conversation at the gym, about foundations and how things come apart. You know what I realized? I didn't answer, but he continued anyway. I realized that you're right. My whole life was built on sand. My reputation, my marriage, my career, all of it was fake. But do you know what isn't fake, Tommy? He stepped closer to the entrance, and I could see his face now. Wild eyes, unkempt hair, several days of stubble. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Money, Tommy. Money is real, and I've got plenty of it hidden where nobody will ever find it. The thing in his hand caught the light again. A tool. Small, chrome-plated, probably expensive. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come inside. We're going to have a nice chat about how you destroyed my life, and then you're going to disappear. Permanently. And Jessica? Jessica? He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Jessica is going to learn what happens to people who betray me. She thought she could save herself by cooperating with the FBI? She thought she could make a deal by throwing me under the bus. I heard Jessica gasp behind me. She'd heard every word. Come on out, Jessica, Blackwood called. I know you're out there. Time for your final performance review. That's when I made my move. I came around the corner fast and low, tackling Blackwood around the waist before he could react. We went down hard on the concrete floor, the tool skittering away into the darkness. Blackwood was stronger than he looked, and desperation gave him extra strength. He clawed at my face, trying to gouge my eyes. But I'd been in plenty of fights in my construction days. I knew how to take a hit and keep moving. I rolled away and came up swinging, catching him with a right cross that snapped his head back. He stumbled but didn't go down, clutching his face. You think you've won? He snarled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. You think destroying my company, my reputation, my marriage is enough? It's a good start. He lunged at me again, but this time I was ready. I sidestepped and let his momentum carry him into a concrete pillar. The impact made a sound like a watermelon hitting pavement. Blackwood slumped against the pillar, dazed but still conscious. You destroyed everything I worked for, he mumbled, his words slurring. 20 years building that company. 20 years of success, of respect, of power. Gone. All because you couldn't handle losing your wife to a better man. A better man? I grabbed him by the shirt and hauled him to his feet. A better man doesn't embezzle money from his own company. A better man doesn't exploit his employees. A better man doesn't try to frame people for crimes they didn't commit. I heard the recording, Richard, the private investigator, the planted evidence, the whole plan. You're not a better man. You're not even a good man. You're just a criminal who got caught. Sirens were wailing in the distance, getting closer. Jessica had called the police. Blackwood heard them, too. His eyes darted toward the tool, still lying somewhere in the darkness. Don't, I warned. It's over. You lost. Accept it like a man. Like a man? He laughed bitterly. You want to talk about being a man? A real man would have fought for his wife. A real man would have stopped me from taking her. A real man would have respected another man's marriage. Marriage? He spat onto the concrete. That wasn't a marriage. It was a business arrangement. She was using you, Tommy, for your house, your credit, your willingness to play the devoted husband while she built her real life with someone who mattered. The words stung because there was truth in them, but they didn't hurt the way they would have 6 months ago. Maybe, I said, but at least I was honest about what I was. You built your entire life on lies. The sirens were getting louder. Red and blue lights began flashing through the warehouse windows. This isn't over, Blackwood said quietly. Even if they arrest me, even if I go to prison, I have friends, connections, people who owe me favors. Maybe, but you'll still be the guy who lost everything to a nobody construction worker. His face twisted with rage, and he made one last desperate lunge for the tool. I caught him halfway, and we went down together in a tangle of arms and legs. This time, I made sure he stayed down. When the police found us 3 minutes later, Blackwood was unconscious, and I was sitting on a crate, examining the cuts on my knuckles. Sir, are you hurt? The first officer through the door had his tool drawn but pointed at the ground. I'm fine. The tool is over there somewhere. He threatened to end me and my ex-wife. More officers poured in, followed by paramedics and what looked like half the fire department. Jessica appeared at the entrance, flanked by 2 detectives who'd apparently been taking her statement. As they loaded Blackwood onto a stretcher, he turned his head and looked at me with undisguised hatred. This isn't over, he whispered. I leaned down close enough that only he could hear my reply. Yes, it is. You're going to federal prison for financial crimes. After tonight, they'll probably add kidnapping and attempted homicide to the charges. You'll be lucky if you see daylight again before you're 70. His eyes widened as the reality of his situation finally sank in. But hey, I added, straightening up, look on the bright side. Maybe you'll meet some nice people in prison who appreciate your management style. They wheeled him away, and I never saw Richard Blackwood again. The trial made national news. Corporate CEO attempts homicide and tries to end his own life after fraud conviction. Financial executive gets life sentence for attempted homicide. Whistleblower ex-wife helps convict former boss. Jessica got immunity in exchange for her testimony. She moved to Portland and got a job with a nonprofit that helped whistleblowers. Apparently, almost dying in a warehouse had given her some perspective on what really mattered. She sent me a Christmas card the first year. Inside, she'd written, "Thank you for saving my life, and thank you for being a better man than I deserved." I never wrote back, but I kept the card. Dave and I finished the Denver project 6 months ahead of schedule and under budget. Word got around about our work, and suddenly Mitchell Morrison Construction had more business than we could handle. We opened offices in 3 cities, hired 40 employees, and landed a contract to build a new federal courthouse in Phoenix. I bought a house in the mountains with a view of the Rockies and a workshop where I could build furniture on weekends. It was everything I'd never known I wanted. But the best part, the part that made all the pain and humiliation and sleepless nights worth it, came 2 years later when I got a call from a reporter at the Denver Post. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm working on a follow-up story about the Pinnacle financial case. I was wondering if you could comment on Richard Blackwood's parole hearing." "His what?" "Parole hearing. He's eligible for early release after serving 4 years of his sentence. The hearing is next week." I hung up and immediately called the district attorney's office in Philadelphia. 20 minutes later, I was on a plane back east. The parole hearing was held in a sterile conference room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Blackwood sat at a table with his lawyer, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loose on his diminished frame. Prison had not been kind to him. I sat in the back row with 3 other people, victims or their representatives, here to argue against his release. When they called me to speak, I walked to the front of the room and looked directly at Blackwood for the first time in 4 years. He looked older, grayer, smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like broken hope. "My name is Thomas Mitchell," I said to the parole board. 4 years ago, this man tried to homicide me and my ex-wife because I exposed his crimes. I told them about the warehouse, about the tool, about the threats and the private investigator, and the plan to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. "Richard Blackwood isn't just a white-collar criminal," I concluded. He's a violent man who believes he's above the law, above consequences, above other people. He spent 4 years in prison, and I guarantee you he spent every day of those 4 years planning his revenge against the people who put him there. The parole board asked a few questions, then dismissed me. As I walked past Blackwood's table, he looked up and our eyes met. He mouthed 2 words. I remember. I stopped, leaned down, and whispered back, "So do I." The parole board deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the chairman looked directly at Blackwood and said, "Parole denied. You will be eligible for another hearing in 3 years." Blackwood's face crumpled. His lawyer patted his shoulder and whispered something in his ear, but he wasn't listening. He was staring at me with the same hatred I'd seen in his eyes that night in the warehouse. As they led him away in shackles, he turned back one last time. "You think you've won?" he called out, his voice echoing off the walls. "You think this is over?" I stood up, looked him right in the eye, and smiled. "Richard," I said clearly, making sure everyone in the room could hear me, "you should have checked your stock price." His face went white, just like it had that night at the company party 6 years ago. But this time, there was no coming back. No second chances. No appeals. The guards dragged him away, and I walked out into the Philadelphia sunshine, finally free. That night, I called Dave from my hotel room. How'd it go? He's staying in prison, at least another 3 years, probably longer. Good, maybe by then he'll have learned his lesson. Guys like Blackwood never learn, Dave. They just get older and angrier and more desperate. So what now? I looked out the hotel window at the city where my old life had ended and my new life had begun. Tomorrow I'd fly back to Denver, back to my company, back to my mountain house and my workshop and my quiet, honest life. Now I go home and forget he ever existed. Think that's possible? I thought about Jessica's Christmas card, about the warehouse, about the moment when Blackwood realized his life was over and mine was just beginning. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think it is." The next morning, I caught the first flight back to Colorado. As the plane lifted off, I watched Philadelphia shrink to a collection of tiny lights, then disappear entirely beneath the clouds. Richard Blackwood was behind me now, literally and figuratively. He was a chapter in my story, not the ending. And my story was just getting started. 6 months later, Mitchell Morrison Construction won the bid to build a new financial district in downtown Denver. The project was worth $50 million and would take 3 years to complete. The groundbreaking ceremony was covered by every major newspaper in Colorado. They interviewed me about my success, my company, my plans for the future. "Mr. Mitchell," one reporter asked, "what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are just starting out?" I thought about the question for a moment, remembering a scared, humiliated man standing in a hotel ballroom 6 years ago, watching his wife kiss another man. "Build something real," I said finally. "Build something honest, and never, ever let anyone convince you that you're not good enough to succeed." "Any regrets about how you got here?" I looked around at the construction site, at the cranes and machinery and workers who were building something permanent, something valuable, something that would last long after we were all gone. "None at all," I said, and I meant it.